So armed with documented examples and specifics, I voiced my dismay about our editorial direction to all levels of management over several months, both locally and at the highest level of power in Toronto. And I did this, I brought in a witness to every scheduled meeting who would document what happened in those meetings. The narrative among mainstream media, including the CBC, emerged early on in the pandemic. By narrative, I mean presenting one side of a complex issue and effectively censoring, canceling, and silencing the other side, only giving voice to experts who control and reinforce the narrative. I'd seen it happen on issues in the past, but never to this degree. For the most part, logic, common sense, and critical thinking are suspended, preventing deep dives on stories holding power to account. Facts may be omitted if they don't fit into the narrow focus of the narrative. Who were we to deliberately withhold information the public needed to know and had a right to know in order to make a decision based on informed consent about their health? Canadians were starting to see this, and they were calling us out on it. So for me, things started to escalate, I would say, it was early 2021, and I was disturbed and alarmed about the language that was being used in some of our editorial meetings. All of a sudden, the term anti-vaxxer came up. And I said, whoa, let's stop right there. What is an anti-vaxxer? Who is an anti-vaxxer? What do they believe? Because are you saying it's someone who's against all vaccines? Because the people I'm speaking to who are vaccine hesitant have had all their other shots, but they have problems with this particular one. I also brought up those who couldn't get it for health reasons because of allergies. And what about people who just needed more time and information to make a decision? And yet we were lumping them all in the same pot as being an anti-vaxxer. I said using this term is dangerous, it's discriminatory, and why are we talking about these people with such hostility and such contempt?
So Marianne, can I just stop you there, because that's a term that's become very sensitive at this hearing, and I'll explain that in a second. So when the term comes up in the newsroom, it's being used in a really negative term, like it's meant to be pejorative?
Almost laughing, ridiculing. It's like these people aren't educated. That was the kind of term that was being used, and that was what was inferred.
And I'll tell you why I stopped you with that. So we've had, I think it was the Saskatoon hearings where I started to notice it. So we'd have witnesses, like literally vaccine injury witnesses, talking about how their lives were literally destroyed by this particular vaccine. But then they would add during their testimony, just literally out of context, but I'm not an anti-vaxxer. And then we had a lady that really was part of one of the biggest freedom groups in Saskatoon, that arose because of the mandates and things like that. And she made a point, but we're not an anti-vaxxer group. And so that told me, because my understanding, and it's based on a lot of the evidence that was here, but also, prior to me coming here, is that these terms are created basically to ridicule, and basically to close our minds, right? So, because no one wants to be labeled as an anti-vaxxer, so if somebody is labeled as an anti-vaxxer, you'll close your mind to them, right? So it's just interesting. I'm sorry to stop you, but it's interesting to hear, because you basically used, laughter as a description, that these people would be laughed at within a newsroom.